Okay, so you're a programmer, which means AI and biology may not exactly be your everyday things. But you're here, so clearly you're at least a little interested in AlphaFold. And you should be.
It's pretty fascinating stuff.
This deep dive is going to give you, I hope, a really clear understanding of what AlphaFold is and how it works and why it matters. We're going to try to avoid all that jargon as much as possible.
Yeah, we want to keep it clear.
We're going to be looking at this paper called Highly Accurate Protein Structure Prediction with AlphaFold.
Groundbreaking paper, really is.
So imagine if you could predict the 3D shape of a protein, like the real intricate shape, just from the building blocks, like the basics. That's what AlphaFold can do.
That's right.
This isn't just some kind of academic thing either. Understanding protein structure is a huge key to things like drug discovery
Huge.
and disease research. We're also going to kind of look at how AlphaFold mixes really cutting-edge AI with stuff from biology and physics.
It's really pretty cool.
Yeah, so let's get into it.
Okay.
So proteins, they're like the workhorses, right,
Definitely.
of life. And the way they're shaped, their structure, determines what they do.
That's right. Their function.
Their function, right. So for decades, scientists have been trying to figure out how to predict that protein structure just from the amino acid sequence.
It's been a huge problem.
It's been a big challenge in biology.
Yeah, the protein folding problem, right.
Right. And all the ways they've been doing it, the experimental methods, they take forever and they cost a ton.
That's a lot of work.
So a computer solution would be a total game changer.
Oh, absolutely.
So then comes AlphaFold.
Right.
So AlphaFold was developed by DeepMind.
Yes.
It's a deep learning model that has made crazy progress in this whole protein structure prediction thing.
Yeah, it's been really impressive.
Think of it like a super fancy program, right?
Okay.
That learns from tons of data and then uses that to make predictions about the 3D shape of proteins.
That's a good way to think about it.
Okay, so how accurate are the predictions?
So the accuracy is really remarkable. There was a CASP14 competition,
Okay.
kind of like the Olympics, for protein structure prediction. And AlphaFold just blew everyone away. Like it was as good as the experimental methods almost.
Wow.
So AlphaFold structures had a median backbone accuracy of 0.96 angstroms RMSD 95.
Okay.
And to give you an idea of how small that is, the width of a carbon atom is something like 1.4 angstroms.
So that's really, really precise.
Super precise, yeah.
So how does it do it? What's going on under the hood?
Yeah, so it combines information from a bunch of different places. One of the most important is multiple sequence alignments,
Okay.
or MSAs. And what that means is you're comparing the amino acid sequences of similar proteins, but in different species. So you're looking for patterns and similarities to try to understand how the protein works.
Got it.
Kind of like when you're trying to understand code from different programs.
Okay.
Yeah.
So by looking at those relationships, those evolutionary relationships, it can make some guesses about the structure of a protein.
Exactly. But it actually goes beyond that. So it also uses what we know about the physics and geometry of protein structures.
Oh, okay.
So for example, we know that some amino acids tend to show up in certain environments within the protein. And we know that the bonds between the amino acids have to have specific angles and distances.
Okay.
So it's kind of like a set of rules or constraints for how it folds, like the syntax and structure of a programming language.
Okay, so it's kind of taking that evolutionary information and then the laws of physics.
Yeah.
And putting that all together.
To make these predictions. Exactly.
Okay, like a detective piecing together clues.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And to process all this information, it uses a special neural network architecture called an evoformer. And this network was specifically designed to deal with the complex relationships between amino acid sequences, the evolutionary history, and the physics.
Okay, so that evoformer network is kind of like the brain of AlphaFold.
You could say that, yeah.
The part that actually makes these predictions?
It processes all that information and keeps refining the prediction, getting closer and closer.
That's pretty cool. I'm curious about the training process.
Okay.
Like, how does it learn to make these predictions?
Right. So its training is unique because it goes beyond just the normal supervised learning. So it doesn't just learn from known protein structures in the protein data bank,
Okay.
the PDB, which is like a big database of already solved structures.
Okay.
It also uses loads of unlabeled protein sequence data,
Unlabeled, so that means sequences where we don't know the structure?
Exactly. And it does that using something called self-distillation,
Okay.
which is a bit like having the model teach itself
Oh.
from its own high confidence predictions.
So if I understand you right, it's kind of like you have this program, right? They can analyze code and then predict what it does with some level of confidence.
Yeah, right.
And then it kind of analyzes its own predictions and then learns from that.
Exactly. Even if it doesn't know the actual answer.
That's a really clever approach. So it's
Yeah.
always learning, always getting better, even if it doesn't have all the information.
Right. But it's not perfect. There are limitations.
Oh, okay. What kind of limitations?
Well, it's not so great with proteins that don't have many interactions internally.
Okay.
You know, the ones that mainly interact with other proteins to form a complex. So it's like if you're trying to understand the shape of one puzzle piece,
Okay.
but you don't know how it fits in with the rest of the puzzle.
Got it.
It's tricky, even with all the information about that single piece.
So it's better with individual proteins than the ones that are part of a bigger thing.
That's right. But they are working on ways to extend AlphaFold to predict the structures of whole protein complexes.
Wow. So that would be like a huge breakthrough.
Oh, absolutely.
If you could model like the whole interaction.
Yeah. Imagine being able to map out those intricate interactions within a cell,
Yeah.
like having a 3D map of a complex software system showing how all the different parts work together.
Oh, yeah. That's a great way to put it.
Okay.
Okay, so let's get a little deeper into some of the technical details.
Okay. So before the break, we were talking about MSAs, right? Those comparisons of similar protein sequences.
Right.
And one thing that really affects how accurate AlphaFold is the MSA depth,
Okay.
which basically means how many similar sequences we have to work with.
Okay.
The more, the better. Especially when you have like 30 or more, the predictions get much more reliable. Like, you know, if you have more data points, the clearer the picture gets.
Yeah. More reference points, makes sense,
Yeah.
better predictions. But what happens if you don't have that many similar sequences? Like, can it still work?
It can, but the accuracy might go down a little.
Oh, okay.
It's kind of like trying to do a jigsaw puzzle, but you only have a few pieces from other similar puzzles to help you.
Okay, yeah.
You might get the general idea, but some of the details might be fuzzy.
Good.
That's when AlphaFold's knowledge about physics and geometry comes in really handy.
Okay.
It can use that to kind of fill in those gaps. You know, refine the predictions based on the basic rules of how proteins fold.
So it's like a backup system, a set of guidelines.
Exactly. And it's that mix of data-driven learning with physics-based modeling that makes AlphaFold so powerful. It's not just blindly crunching numbers, it's using a real understanding of how proteins fold.
So we talked about the evoformer, right? That special neural network architecture. For our programmer friends out there, can you explain how that's different from other neural networks?
Sure. So a typical neural network might analyze a sequence, you know, one step at a time, kind of like reading lines of code in order. But the evoformer can take a more global view. It can look at relationships between parts of the sequence that are really far apart, kind of like when you're looking at dependencies between different modules in a big code base.
Okay.
And being able to see those long-range interactions is really important for understanding how a protein folds.
Okay.
Because those interactions, even if they're far apart in the sequence, they can still have a huge impact on the shape.
So it's like it can see the forest for the trees, right?
Exactly. And this ability is made even better by a thing called invariant point attention. IPA for short.
Okay.
Imagine you're looking at a 3D model of a protein.
Okay.
You can turn it around, flip it, move it any way you want, but the relationships between the atoms stay the same.
Right.
So IPA lets AlphaFold understand those relationships no matter how the protein is oriented.
Okay.
It's kind of like being able to understand how a program works, like the logic of it, no matter how the code is formatted.
That's amazing. So it's not just predicting the shape. It's understanding the spatial relationships. Kind of like a programmer understands how different parts of a code base are connected.
Exactly. And this is a big part of why it's so accurate. But beyond just the technical stuff, you know, AlphaFold is having a real impact in lots of different areas, like way beyond just research.
Okay, yeah, let's talk about that. We talked about drug discovery earlier, but can you give me some examples of how AlphaFold is being used to make new drugs?
Sure. Take the fight against COVID-19, for example. Researchers used AlphaFold to figure out the structure of the SARS-CoV-2 main protease, a key enzyme that the virus needs to replicate.
Right.
And then they use that information to design drugs that could block that protease. It's like if you know exactly what a lock looks like, you can make a key that fits perfectly and jams it up.
So it's like a targeted approach.
Exactly.
Huh.
More effective and fewer side effects. And this approach isn't just for infectious diseases. It's being used to make drugs for all sorts of conditions like cancer, Alzheimer's, even rare genetic diseases. For example, researchers are looking at the proteins involved in forming those amyloid plaques, the things that build up in Alzheimer's. If they can figure out how those proteins aggregate, they might be able to make drugs to prevent that or even reverse it.
So it's helping us to understand these diseases and maybe even find cures.
Exactly. It's like having this super powerful microscope that lets us see exactly how these diseases work at the molecular level. But drug discovery is just one piece of the puzzle. AlphaFold is doing cool stuff in other fields too.
Okay, like what?
Well, it's making a big difference in disease research beyond just making drugs.
Oh, okay.
By predicting the structure of misfolded proteins, the ones that are often involved in diseases like Parkinson's or cystic fibrosis, scientists can get a much better understanding of how these diseases actually develop.
Hmm.
And then they can use that knowledge to come up with better diagnostic tools, figure out which targets to go after with treatments, maybe even figure out how to prevent them altogether.
So it's like having a detailed map of a city, and then you can see where the traffic jams are and figure out how to keep things moving smoothly.
That's a great way to put it. And that kind of detailed understanding of how our biological systems work is crucial for coming up with effective treatments and cures. Another area where AlphaFold is making a splash is protein engineering.
Oh.
Now we can actually design new proteins with very specific functions. It's like having a molecular 3D printer. We can create proteins that don't even exist in nature.
Wow, that's incredible. Like, what kind of proteins are they making?
Well, one exciting area is making new enzymes for industry. Enzymes are those proteins that speed up chemical reactions,
Wow.
and they're super important in tons of industrial processes, like making food, making biofuels. If we can design enzymes that are more stable or more active, we can really optimize those processes and make them more efficient and sustainable.
So we're using nature to solve problems.
Exactly. We're also making biosensors, devices that use proteins to detect specific substances. So we can make proteins that bind to certain molecules and use them in things like medical diagnostics or environmental monitoring.
So it's like having a tiny detective that can sniff out specific molecules.
Exactly. And there's so much more. People are looking at using AlphaFold to design biomaterials, like self-assembling protein scaffolds that could be used to make artificial tissues or even
It
organs.
sounds like the possibilities are endless.
Pretty much. But beyond all those applications, AlphaFold is also helping us to understand basic biology in a way we never could before.
Okay.
It's giving us a whole new level of insight into how proteins fold, how they interact, how they work. And that's fundamental to understanding everything about life, from how cells communicate to how organisms evolve.
Wow. So it's like having this Rosetta Stone for the language of life.
That's a great way to put it.
This is amazing. It sounds like AlphaFold is more than just a scientific breakthrough. It's like a whole new way of thinking about biology.
Yeah.
But you mentioned earlier that it still has some limitations, like with those proteins that don't interact much internally.
Yeah.
What else are researchers working on to make AlphaFold even better?
Well, one big one is predicting protein complexes.
Yeah.
Right now, AlphaFold is really good at predicting single proteins, but in reality, a lot of proteins work together in these complex structures like molecular machines.
Right.
Figuring out how those fit together is a whole other ballgame. It's like going from predicting the shape of individual puzzle pieces to predicting how they all fit together to make the complete picture.
Yeah.
But people are working on it.
Okay, good.
There are new versions of AlphaFold in the works that can predict the structure of protein complexes. So that's a really exciting area of research.
Definitely. What other areas are they exploring?
Well, another cool area is combining AlphaFold with other AI techniques. For example, you could combine it with models that can predict protein function.
So it's like going from knowing what a tool looks like to knowing what it's used for.
Exactly. And this kind of AI integration is already leading to some really cool discoveries. For example, researchers have used it to find potential drug targets for things like cancer and COVID-19. They've even used it to study the evolution of proteins to see how they've changed over millions of years.
So it's like we're at the beginning of a revolution in biology driven by AI.
That's exactly right. And it's an incredible time to be part of it. We're only just starting to scratch the surface of what AI can do to help us understand and even manipulate the building blocks of life.
This has been an incredible journey. It's clear that AlphaFold has the potential to change the world of biology and medicine in ways we can't even imagine yet.
And the most exciting thing is that we're just getting started. The field is moving so fast, with new discoveries happening all the time.
We've talked about a lot with AlphaFold, how it works inside, how well it predicts protein structures, and all the different things people are already doing with it. I mean, it really feels like we're seeing this huge shift in biology, all thanks to AI.
It really does. Like someone gave us this new super powerful magnifying glass, and we're just starting to see all these amazing details we couldn't before.
Earlier, we were talking about how AlphaFold is speeding up drug discovery, right? So for someone who's more into software development, can you kind of compare that to how new tools change the game for programmers?
Yeah, totally. Think about how much software development has changed. I mean, we used to write code line by line. Now we have all these high-level languages and frameworks that do a lot of the heavy lifting for us.
Right.
We can build way more complex systems now. AlphaFold is kind of doing the same thing for drug discovery. It's automating this process of predicting protein structures, which used to take forever. Now researchers can spend more time on the creative stuff, like finding good drug targets and figuring out new ways to treat diseases.
So it's like how new tools let programmers build more complex software. AlphaFold is helping scientists develop better, more targeted treatments.
Exactly. And just like open source software has been huge for collaboration and innovation in the software world, the fact that AlphaFold is open source is doing the same thing for science. Researchers everywhere are using it to study all kinds of things, from how diseases work to making new enzymes for industry. That kind of shared knowledge is really speeding things up, leading to breakthroughs we never could have imagined just a few years ago.
It's pretty amazing to think about the impact it's already having and how much more it could do in the future.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what are the main things you want our listeners to take away from this?
Well, first, I want them to really grasp just how powerful this technology is. I mean, AlphaFold is solving a problem that's been bugging scientists for decades, and it's doing it incredibly well. This is a huge deal, not just for biology, but for science in general.
Yeah, I totally agree. It shows what we can do when we combine human ingenuity with AI to tackle really tough scientific problems.
Exactly. And second, I want people to remember that this is just the start. AlphaFold is changing quickly, and it's going to get even more impressive in the years to come. Just like software development is always evolving, AI-driven biology is a super dynamic field that keeps pushing the limits of what's possible.
So it's a really exciting time to be following this, whether you're a scientist or just someone interested in how technology is changing biology.
For sure. And finally, I want everyone to think about the big picture implications of AlphaFold. This thing has the potential to change so many fields. Medicine, agriculture, energy, materials, science, you name it. It's important to talk about the ethical side of this too, to make sure we use it responsibly and for the good of everyone.
That's a really good point. It's not just about the technology itself, but how we choose to use it.
Exactly. And those choices are going to have a huge impact, not just on science and medicine, but on the future of humanity.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive into AlphaFold. We've talked about how it works, all the cool things it can do, and how it could shape the future of science and society as a whole.
Yeah, it's been great exploring all of this with you and our listeners. We hope this deep dive has given everyone a good understanding of AlphaFold and maybe sparked an interest in learning even more about this amazing world of AI-driven biology.
Thanks for joining us on this journey. Keep exploring, keep learning, and keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible. We'll see you next time.